Hey team, Ben Nash from Pivot Wealth here, and today I'm really excited to be here with two of our lovely clients, Liv and Sean. Guys, thanks for being here.
Nice,
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
No, look, guys, I'm super keen to, I suppose, download some of the light bulb moments for you guys. You just went through the financial planning process just over the last sort of few months. But I think a good place to start is, can you just tell us a bit about how life was before you came to see Pivot?
I'll start.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We have been in a period where we've just had kids. We've come out the other side. We're both back in full-time work. And I think I in particular have always been quite focused on savings and how we're spending our money and budgeting and that side of things.
Me less so, yeah.
But and I think we were in a place where we were pretty comfortable with how things were going, but I personally felt like I'm not an expert at this stuff, and we were sort of bumbling along and it was fine, but I couldn't help but ask the question, are we missing out on opportunities? And that really got me thinking. I mean, I've read a bit. I work in financial services, so I guess I'm potentially more tuned into this sort of stuff than a lot of other people might be, but I'm not an expert. And that was really the catalyst for me. It was a sense of not unease at where we're at, but more not having fulfilled the potential that we could be looking at in terms of our finances.
Yeah, and I think that I initially was quite hesitant. Liv was putting this forward, and I sort of felt, the way I felt was I thought we had things set up quite well. I didn't see how much value could be added. And I think the thing that's been resoundingly clear after going through the process is the things that I didn't know about were the things that we needed to speak to experts about, and that's where the differences really come in.
Yeah, it's definitely that unknown that there's so many things out there that you guys are, highly capable professionals in the space that you're in, that, for someone on the outside looking in, it's something it seems simple, and money's one of these things that, because we all have a few bucks in our pocket, that you sort of can fall into that trap of thinking that it should be easy, but like everything is its own sort of specialty these days. So guys, tell us, at that time, what were some of the, and I know obviously this is a bit more driven initially from your side, Liv, what were the sort of the biggest challenges or frustrations for you at that time?
I think for me, I've been in the same job for a long time, and I'd had a lot of security in that. And I was moving into a period where I was looking to do something new and different, and I wanted to make sure that we were set up really, really well for me to feel safe to do that. I know that things like our investments in particular, we had some spare cash, and we just weren't exactly sure what to do with that. We had it sitting in an offset, and that was good, but I couldn't help but ask the question, what's the best way for us to, or what's the best strategy for us to be using with this money going forward? And then the other piece for me was, I just hate paperwork. I'll be totally honest.
I think we all do.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a sort of thing that just sits on my to-do list sometimes for years, and I couldn't help but feel that I was, again, missing a bit of an opportunity there in my lack of, I don't know, motivation to get it done. And this guy, I mean, he's a hell of a lot worse than I am. So I knew that was a big factor too. We just needed a driving force to help us get stuff done.
I think the other thing too was knowing what paperwork, because that was what surprised me as well, was not only am I unlikely to do the paperwork when I do know what is supposed to be done, but there's a lot more to it than I'd realised that should be done, or that could be done.
Yeah, I think it's I know that for me personally, I'm the same, that if I have, it's mainly financial services companies that require this paperwork. They're basically like the last bastion of the non-paperless way of doing business. But if I have something for my bank accounts that I have to do it, it's like you have to print the form, and then you have to sign the form, and like it's it takes some time to go through the process. So I think definitely one of the benefits we see is that it forces you, because we have the structure of the meetings and they're locked in the calendar, that that you've got to push through, not only just with paperwork, but you've got to make some decisions, you've got to make some choices, and sometimes we need that extra push to do the things that we know that we want to do but are easy to let life sort of get in the way of.
We definitely drew the similarity to having a personal trainer, but for finance, it's someone there cracking the whip, reminding you each week that you've got to do X push-ups / X number.
Yeah, it is sort of like a personal trainer, although we do some of the push-ups for you as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I appreciated that. I think also, I mean, the only other thing I was going to say, for me, it was a real, it was a chance to sense check our feelings about certain things.
Yeah.
I think in a relationship as well, you often have set ideas in your own head about what you're, say, saving for or what your plans are, and it forces you to have a conversation which you might have danced around previously. And so I think that was another really big benefit from this. It made us sit down and go, well, what actually matters to each of us? Are we thinking about the give and take in this, and what does that mean for us longer term? And so I think for me that was another really big benefit, because even being given options and choices throughout the process forced us to have some conversations that we probably wouldn't have otherwise had sooner rather than later. So that was a really big benefit for me.
And gave you more, you're able to translate the data to understand what's more realistic, what are the realistic options, and what sacrifices need to be made in order to get to this option, or conversely, maybe, to change your path in the long term to get to a different place. It was empowering to be able to see that on paper, I think, to sort of help map out what those decisions are likely to be.
Yeah, and I think that's something that sometimes stops people from setting goals or taking action, is that you don't know what's realistically possible. Like, everybody wants to have, a really nice roof over their heads and, plenty of dollars rolling into the bank account every week or month. But sometimes, you need to sort of see it to see, well, what's real, or what do we need to change to make those things happen. But I think it's interesting what you say that about getting on the same page. And I know for me, having seen a lot of people go through this process, that I think for couples in particular, it's one of the biggest benefits, that even if one person is generally the person that takes a bit more responsibility, or that is more focused on this, or that's more interested on this stuff, but when it's just that one person that's doing the driving, then they're the one that they're sort of like, you're the one that's responsible for everything. Whereas really, like, you guys want to be jointly. I know for my wife and I, it's the same.
So you really struck a chord there.
Yeah. I don't want to be responsible for making all of the financial decisions in our relationship. I always make sure that whenever there's something that's key that's happening, I want it to be a joint decision, because I don't want to be the one that's on the hook. No one knows what is the absolute best thing to do until after the fact. The only thing we can do is we know what's not smart, and obviously we avoid that. But it's interesting what you say in terms of getting aligned. Tell me what sort of changed in terms of, you mentioned that you had different ways of thinking about things, or that you hadn't spoken about things, and you had these conversations before. What were the shifts, if any, off the back of those conversations?
I think ultimately it determined our final strategy. When we started talking about what we wanted, both from a personal perspective, but also in terms of our careers and business and that side of things, once we got to the nub of what that looked like, it actually really just pushed our final decision about what we might like to do with our money. And we were given a few different options, and in fact, we ended up going with one which, in the longer run, might not have meant that the one we went with, might not have meant we had as much of as big a nest egg at the end. but it really suited where we're at now, what we were thinking for the next 5 years and 10 years. So that was quite interesting for me to kind of, I'd always just thought, you just want to push for the most money, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But actually it forced us to go, no, hold on, this is our life we're living, and we have dreams and aspirations and things we want to do, and that's actually what matters.
That's part of the plan too.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you shape what you do with your money around that? And I think ultimately that was a nice release for me to go, it's not so much about having the most at the end. It's actually about how you want to set it up and use it well along the way so that you get to do the things that you really want to do in your life. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I think that you making sure that you can live the lifestyle while you get the financial outcomes that you want, and finding that balance is really key. But it's actually because we've got these financial modeling tools where we can sort of project ahead. We always know it's super easy. The best strategy is go borrow as much money as you can and then go and invest that money. But it's unlikely to be the best strategy for anyone, because you've got to be able to sleep at night and you've got to be able to live the lifestyle that you want along the way without the pressure. And then there's also an element of, I think, like how hard do you actually need to push? Because I think we often underestimate what's actually possible. Whereas when you see the numbers, even using some conservative assumptions around, share market growth or property market growth, then you realize that that power of compounding interest actually has a massive impact over time. And then it's like, I'd take all that extra risk and be stressed out for the next 10 years when you can get to a really comfortable place anyway. And
stress and risk,
And I think that for me was, we're in our late 30s. We've been working now for, 15 plus years. And it was nice to suddenly just stop and go, hold on, we're no longer earlier on in our work life. We've actually, it was a bit of a wake, but it was a bit of a wake up call of, actually, we're going to be okay. I hadn't really let myself believe that, as crazy as it sounds. And I think for me that was really nice. It actually took a big weight off my shoulders to be able to say, you know what, we could continue on exactly as we are, or even we could really substantially change that and ease off, and we're actually going to be okay, and that was a big aha moment for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. We have the advantage of having seen this, having seen so many people go through this planning process, but it still amazes me, like when you see how such a big shift can happen just by sort of looking ahead, that it amazes me that people don't take the time to do this before, or when they're making bigger decisions like buying properties or changing their investment approach as well. But so for you guys, what was the catalyst? What actually prompted you to do something, to take action and start thinking about getting your financial planning in place?
We'll let you take this one, Liv.
I've been thinking about it for a long time, to be honest. And we had many years ago, like over a decade ago, when we really didn't have any assets. But I knew I didn't know much. We'd actually gone and spoken to someone initially then, and they pretty much said to us, look, come back later. You're so early on in this journey. And I took that with a grain of salt, but I realized a decade later I actually had taken that on, and I suddenly thought, hold on, I know how I'm feeling right now. I want some more advice. I'm not gonna let that little voice in the back of my head tell me to stay away for forever. And I think I'd gone through a process of I was almost a bit obsessed with being on top of all of our finances, and I realized that was fueled by a sense of of a lack of certainty and not a deep enough knowledge of what the best thing for us was to do. And I think I tried relatively unsuccessfully to have conversations with Sean about some of this, some of this stuff.
Life,
yeah, I know. But just like high level, and we never really, like, we'd sort of, again, dance around it, but we never solved it to a point where I was like, oh, I actually feel like we've made a change or made a firm decision on this. And
I felt like we started to track spending and understood where money was going, but that was really it. We sort of just didn't penetrate the surface beyond that, and didn't have any sort of bigger picture about what that actually meant. And that was obviously where you guys came in.
And from my perspective, it was just one of those things. One day I was like, right, we have to do this. It's time. I'm not waiting any longer.
That's good. I think that's one of the advantages, and I think it's partly, COVID has given us a bit more pause to sort of reflect on things and a little bit more time to get our life admin sorted. But guys, look, obviously we went through a whole bunch of things when you went through that planning process. What are the top sort of couple of things that have been the most impactful for you guys?
I think just there's been a few for me. The superannuation piece and just getting some advice around firstly where to have our super sitting, but also how to think about it. I mean, I just always just let it sit there and never really put it under the microscope. So that has been really helpful. Also some of the conversations about, breaking into the investment market. Sorry, don't mind. See you recording, so sorry about that. Let's start this section again. I think so investments, I think again, we've had money sort of sprayed everywhere. It's been a bit ad hoc, and so it was really helpful just to start thinking about consolidating that and the power and the financial benefits of doing that. And then the last piece for me, as someone who I like order and structure, and it's been actually just setting up our savings and our spendings in a way that it's really easy to manage and see, and not have to. I don't have to spend every day kind of going in and going, is everything okay? Have we paid this off?
Where do I allocate that cost and what do I do with that? Yeah.
Exactly. What about you?
Oh, it's similar, I'd say. I mean, there's nothing too much beyond that. I think it's probably good that initial, I think we've already touched on it really, but that initial, we've loosely talked about a lot of different things, but let's go actually, all right, what are those things? Let's put them on paper. Let's put them into some sort of model to assess whether or not they're viable and when they'll be viable and what needs to happen for them to become viable. Was those extra steps were the bits that we're never doing. And we'd just sort of loosely talk about it on surface level and never really come to any sort of strategy to get to that point. We'd sort of go, okay, well, this is where we're at and this is where we want to be, but we didn't really talk about everything in the middle there.
And I think, interestingly enough, we're different people. Sean's much more into data, models, the math side of things, whereas I'm all about the emotion. And so it really helped us to find peace for both of our needs in that respect.
Yeah, and I think that the data, the numbers are obviously important, but the emotions are important as well. And a good strategy or a great strategy is one that gives you balance between the two. But I think it's difficult, for what you say, Sean, that looking at those numbers in that sort of with that level of rigor, it's quite challenging for someone to do on their own if you don't have those tools available or you don't know how to use them. Anyway, but I'm also interested, Liv, in what you said, for someone that's come from being very on top, like you say, that you made it a point of being really on top of your day-to-day money management, that something as simple as just a banking framework can be so powerful from a day-to-day perspective. But it absolutely is. I know I've been using the same system that you guys use for the last probably about 8 years now. And for me, it's been a total game changer that you just don't, it's just one less thing to think about, that it can just bubble away there. And then you know that you can just make the, get involved when you need to make the bigger decisions, as opposed to the day-to-day stuff. We've all got enough on our plates to deal with anyway, right?
I have realised though that it's hard to break old habits, but now I'm like, oh, there's nothing for me to do.
What are you going to do?
Yeah. It's funny. I've had some other clients that we've been working with for probably about 5 years. And I think it's really easy. Like a lot of people, you just fall into the habit of checking your bank accounts all of the time. And I know at the start that one of the people in his couple, she's like, I'm still checking all the time. I'm like, well, you can check. You don't need to, but you can.
No,
I'm like, but that'll stop over time.
It's like, it's taken care of. And so that's now for me to let that go. But it's interesting to sell. I'm like, I'm a bit less useful.
Yeah. Well, no, you've elevated. You've just been elevated in your position. You've outsourced.
Spend time doing things that actually matter. We'll just stop for a sec. Hey, Mo, do you mind not doing the washing up? It's noisy.
We're literally.
I can't hear it at my end. So.
Okay.
Bye. Don't forget your shirts over there.
You guys have got a busy household.
It's
all happening.
time to close the door.
On that point, really, that's actually been one of the things we haven't mentioned, but how. I mean, I've got to be at work when I've got to be at work, and I can't work from home or anything like that. I can't just duck out to have a meeting and deal with it. But the ability to be flexible using Zoom and platforms like this to just touch base on a weekly basis for short periods of time to check in has been something that would really surprise me. I didn't think it was going to be possible. I thought this was going to be, dust off the button-up shirt and head into the city for a corporate meeting, but it's been quite the opposite experience. So that's actually been great.
Yeah, it has. It's made it much, much easier to manage. And even just getting, an occasional tap on the shoulder, hey, do this, and you think, I do. I have 10 minutes right now. Off I go. I'll fill out that form or I'll change this. It makes it a much less daunting and arduous process as well.
Yeah, and I think that knowing exactly what you need to do, and like you talked sort of jokingly about elevating your position in your role as the CFOs of your your money management, but it's true that you want to make sure that you just, when you do spend the time, that it is focused time, that you know exactly what you're doing, and then you can just tick the box and move on. Because I think where people get unstuck is that you don't know what to do, and then you're like trying to find, what form do I need to do, or where do I need to do that thing, and then and then life happens and you go too hard, and then it's all that, then you're missing the opportunities to actually get the results that you want.
I have to laugh. When we got sent all our paperwork, I sighed a huge sigh of relief, because literally everything was marked. So I had to fill in or sign, I was like, this is just heaven to me. But I still managed to screw it up. I was asked to put in my birth date, and I put the date. Yeah. Well, I put my birth date with the current year.
So fix that tomorrow.
It's easy. It is easy.
You can't fix some things about us, but
it is definitely easily done. But guys, I'm keen to hear, like, how are you guys feeling about your money now compared to how you were feeling?
Relieved is one thing. I think probably just the confirmation, as Liv's sort of already mentioned, but the confirmation that we're heading in the right direction, but then also a little bit of excitement too, because we've got some, I guess, movement in our careers that we've been talking about that we can both go after. Liv at the moment, me potentially in the near future, and I feel like I've got a bit reinvigorated in a career context, because I can head toward those things with a bit of a clearer picture. whereas previously sort of just going through the motions without a clear strategy about getting there. So that's that's been the main impact for me.
And for me, I think, and you touched on it, there's a bit of excitement because I feel now the things that we've been imagining we might like to do, I realise now that we thought perhaps that they might never happen. And so there was an element of feeling a bit like, oh, it's nice to dream, but, you know, in our dreams. Whereas now I'm like, actually, we can do these things. We really actually can achieve it. Sure, we'll have to, you know, dig deep in certain places and think about, you know, it's not just going to happen, but the fact that it's possible and I can see that now, I'm like, oh, yes. Like, it's exactly. A good feeling.
Do that renovation.
Yeah.
Push down that retirement age.
Start your own business. Like all these things that were wish lists, but I really wasn't sure that we'd ever be able to do.
Yeah.
I think it's hard if you haven't sort of stress tested your strategy to have someone say, no, actually, yes, this is possible. And it is, you know, there's things that you want, but sometimes the goals just seem so big that you sort of wonder, you know, is it really possible? There's a lot of zeros on these, you know, numbers. Can we get there? But it's I think you need to find ways to keep yourself motivated, and that's a big way of doing that. That if you can see, you know, someone goes, yes, this is okay, then you know what needs to happen. And, you know, then you just tick off those milestones and you see it come together. And then it's even, you see it like you guys have just only recently gone through the process of setting things up. But when you see the numbers actually come in afterwards, then, you know, you're just ticking those milestones. And again, it's remotivating. And that's why we go through that process like at least once a year to reset the numbers and look at it again, so that you get that, you one, acknowledge the progress that's happened, but two, again, get excited for the future. Guys, I think like when people haven't gone through the financial advice process before, they often don't really know what to expect. For you guys, what sort of surprised you the most about the financial advice process?
How much I didn't know. I think that was it. Like I, as I said, was quite hesitant at first to spend the money, because I was like, oh, are we going to see the benefit beyond that? And obviously we have, but I was very surprised by the ways in which that was revealed or realised, because I kind of, I think I thought of us as, you know, like a too small of a fish is maybe a way of thinking about it to really see a lot of benefit from it. But there was a lot of the, as I said at the start, the reality is it's the reason you guys have been so useful for us is because of the stuff that we didn't know. And that's had a big impact. Yeah.
And I think for me, I mean, my bread and butter is all about experiences, and what I really liked in addition to that, I mean, you have to be providing some value, obviously, but it's, I mean, we've been working with Bruce. He's such a great guy. Like, we just really, really like him. And easy to talk to. He, you know, understands where we're coming from. He challenged us as well, just to think about what, you know, he got a good sense of who we were and what we might be aspiring to. And if anything was off on that, he challenge us on it. And then in addition to that, the piece around the admin side of things, so having the team in the background who are, you know, doing all the legwork really to get us organized, you know, that for me was it's, you know, I that's a side of it. It might only feel like a small side, but for me, as a super busy mum who has a full-on career and who has literally a to-do list that, like, it freaks me out just thinking about it. It's just nice to have someone else thinking about that stuff and not having to do it, you know, just to be reminded, hey, by the way, you know, can you do this, rather than having to be the one thinking, oh my God, I have to do this and I have to remind someone else to do it. And so I think that for me, the value of that should not be underestimated, because it really helps.
And I think it's that mental, like freeing you up with the mental capacity as well, that you know that even if you do sort of, you know, get busy and drop the ball for a bit, that it's not, you are going to get that tap on the shoulder that is going to get things back moving again.
We've dropped the ball quite a few times. We've had, I mean,
the friendly reminder email.
Life has gone on for us during this period. I mean, I've had to have knee surgery. We've had a kid start primary school. We've, you know, I've started a new business all in this period. Like, it's been crazy. And yet we still managed to get there. And I know that if we hadn't engaged you guys, we wouldn't have done it. There's absolutely no way we would have. And so that's,
Well, it's awesome. It's awesome to hear. And I think, you know, the more things you've got going on in your life, the easier it is to let that stuff slip. So that's the thing that, you know, taking advantage, making sure that you're starting to, you know, getting that momentum happening and not missing opportunities is a big part of it. But I'm interested, Sean, in what you said about not feeling like you're too small a fish, because you guys are like, you've got a fair bit of stuff going on. Like you said, Liv, you're just sort of about to start a business. You start, you know, kicking a lot of butt in your careers generally, and, you know, a bit of investment, some assets and stuff around. Thinking back, knowing what you know now, what sort of situations do you feel are suited to people having a financial advisor?
It's hard to speak beyond my own experience, I suppose, but I think it's difficult to go beyond my own experience. I think having sizable debt and have best managed debt, I think, is something that is often not necessarily thought of well, because you're sort of like, this is inevitably something that I'm just paying off, but structuring that the best way through to what to do with your cream on top, essentially, like how to best put whatever it is you've got above and beyond your daily spending and paying off said debt, what to do with that, and the best way to do it was, I just didn't think it was going to be that significant. So I suppose the positives and the negatives of having debt and money on top, and what can actually be done with it was surprising to me. Like I said, I just didn't feel as though there was that much that could be done with that, and that was surprising.
And I think, I mean, for me, the realization there is that it could be any amount or any circumstance. It doesn't, you know, and it's really going to be dependent on your individual needs and wants. And I think that for me was a lesson there as well. I was like, we might feel like we don't need it or we don't qualify. But frankly, you know, everyone qualifies for doing better with their money. It might be less money, but that doesn't really matter. And so
I suppose in my mind there was some imaginary threshold of where it sort of crossovers into being beneficial, and I guess that threshold was way lower than I had anticipated, and even I guess possibly even based on our first experience with that financial planner, where he was sort of like, look, there's not that much going on, maybe come back to me. It's not, I mean, we have obviously gone into more debt since then, but you know, I think that gave me the impression that we really needed to have more at stake, I suppose, in order to see the benefit.
And I think that was the wrong lesson.
It was the wrong rule.
I think I like when the first job that I ever had in financial services, that was our sort of line as well, that we would see people that would come in, you know, 20s, 30s, they want to be smarter with their money and more on top of things. And because the business just wasn't built to provide for those sorts of clients, we would say the same thing, come back when you've got more money and do that. Whereas really the sort of stuff that we do now, if you had come to see us at that time, that we would have helped you to get to where you are now, but probably, you know, a bit easier and a bit faster. So I think that it's unfortunate to see that can sort of, like you say, that gives you that sort of led you to wait 10 years before actually seeking out more advice. But you need to just if you're looking for advice in that, when you're in that life stage, you just need to find someone that provides advice to people in that life stage.
Exactly.
And
I would say as well, I mean, and I do think it's probably shifting, but people are just expected to know stuff about money and what to do with it, because we all end up having to earn it to survive. But there's so much that you can educate yourself on and lean on other people to help you with as well. And I think, I think for me, I mean, I always go to my dad typically, but he's self-taught, and I'm like, well, frankly, like, how do I know that you've got the best idea about what you're doing? I mean,
he'll definitely tell you he has.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's true though, and it's like a different world these days. That I think to like our parents' generation, when they grew up, things were a lot simpler then. We've got a lot more stuff going on these days, but I think it's also really common for, in particular, for like professionals and executives. Like you guys are obviously really smart and great at what you do. That we sort of put, I think we put a lot of the pressure comes from ourselves that we think, oh yeah, we're capable and we're high achievers over here. So, and this thing's money, which it's just money, so it should probably be easy, but it's just not. And then there's this weird sort of almost maybe not a stigma, but there's like this like mindset stuff that kicks in because people don't talk about it, and then we think that everyone else is more on top of things than what we are, and then it's like this, how you say, that self-talk and that voice comes in, and again, it can just be, it's almost like not shame is the wrong word, but it's like this, you don't want to reach out for help. Yeah, and so for for anyone that's sort of listening in, thinking about getting some help, what would be your with their money? I mean, what would be your tips for them?
I think it's important to you don't need to know what you ultimately want out of it, but you need to be open to letting go a little bit of control. That's from my perspective. You also need
here's
to.
The keys.
I think you can think of it as well as a really good way to bring balance and confidence in other aspects of your life. So my advice is, if you're feeling anxious or nervous about many or lots of things that are going on, this can be a really good way to remove perhaps something that you didn't even realize was bubbling away under the surface, that's making you feel a bit uncomfortable about where you're at in the world. And so I just say, do your homework in terms of finding someone who you want to work with, who fits you. And I think your point, Ben, is really fair about, there are financial planners who do focus on people in their 20s and 30s. And so know that and know who you are, and then go and try and find the people that fit based on that, because it's almost like your hairdresser, in that you want to find someone that you want to spend, you want to spend time with them, you like to have a chat, but then you also want to go out looking really good, right? So, so I think that's something really important to consider. Find the right match for you.
Yeah, I'll have to relay that analogy to Bruce when I
He has good hair.
He does. Sean, what would be your tips? Because you mentioned at the start, and I think it's a pretty common thing with blokes in particular, that it's like bit of that, like, oh, I don't really need that, I feel like we're sort of doing okay. What would be your tips for somebody that's got that sort of thought going through their mind?
I mean, fortunately, I've got a very
listen to your wife.
Yeah, I've got a very convincing wife. God, we can cut this bit out, right? No, I mean, I think the hesitancy from my perspective was like, do I want to spend this money, and am I going to see the benefit? And Liv, I essentially at the end of the day, I was like, look, Liv, if you're convinced it's going to may have the impact, then I'm willing to take the plunge in the process. And I've been obviously pleasantly surprised at least. And maybe that's it. Don't be a stubborn, masculine male and give it a go. I think realizing your own not shortcomings, but where your knowledge barrier reaches a wall was a big thing for me. Like I didn't say, like I thought I knew so much, and it was so much about this topic, and that was where money was where it needed to be, and that was sort of, you know, any sort of gain was not going to be that gigantic, and so therefore spending the money wasn't worth it. But you know, I've since taken the plunge, and I think that's probably it, has having an open mind to the process, and I think as well as that, realizing that those things for me personally can hold me back, because I often will, you know, I'm the kind of person that might end up going, all right, well, let's compare and spreadsheet 10 financial planners and figure out what's going to be the best approach that way, instead of, and in the process, you know, we'll be another 10 years down the track, whereas
exactly.
Yeah.
That spreadsheeting takes time.
But almost to the detriment.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think your comments on like taking that leap of faith or taking the plunge, I think that, you know, at the end of the day, with this sort of approach, that sometimes and we try to, you guys have seen that we quantify much more than most in terms of where the value is coming from and what other people have got. We never know what the value is exactly going to be for you guys before we get into the process, but that's the nature of the process, that sometimes you do need to do your research, make sure that you've, you know, got a good hairdresser, I suppose, but then you do just need to take that leap of faith. Yeah. But guys, look, last question before we wrap. The sort of following on from what you were just saying, that, you know, obviously you guys are paying us fees for, you know, a fee for the support that we're giving you. In your mind, what makes those fees worth paying?
Well, the return on investment. I mean, that's a good start. I think that aspect of things is really, and you said it yourself, you do a good job of demonstrating, you know, how that's quantified, and that's necessary, because at the end of the day, you know, like I said with the hairdresser analogy, you might like your hairdresser, but if you come out with a haircut that makes you feel uncomfortable and you look terrible, well, you know, you're not going to go back, are you? And so, and you know, obviously that's really important. And then, as I said before, I think the perhaps the unappreciated benefit is just, it's having those prompts to get things done, and then having a team that are supporting you and taking a lot of the heavy lifting out of what you have to do to get there, that makes it a worthwhile spend.
And I think the other thing that surprised me, because I was definitely initially coming at it from a return on investment perspective, but the excitement for the future and the peace of mind that everything's going to be okay is actually, there's a lot of value there that's not necessarily monetary, that has made a big impact.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, and this is that sometimes, because obviously when people are trying to make a decision as whether they go down this path, they're saying, you know, where is the value? You know, where are we going to get value from? And I would, from the bias point of view of having seen so many people go through the process, you could almost say that the non-money benefits are worth the fees in itself. Like, how much is that conference worth? 10 grand, or the excitement for the future and motivation, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
The paperwork piece, for sure.
And the outsourcing, exactly. You think about your hourly rate, what does that mean? That then you're, you know, crunching these forms. But I think that there are so many elements, but that's great to hear. Guys, look, thank you very much for taking the time. Great to hear about your story. Really pumped for you know, what's coming up for you guys, and it's great to see it all come together.
Thanks, Ben.
Likewise. Thanks.
Good to chat.
Appreciate it.